I need you to stand still to get.
I know. I'm working on it. Okay, so before we get started, it's been a while. I want everyone to take out your smartphones. And if you're on Twitter or you're on Facebook, this is where it kind of gets fun. So I want you to take out your smartphones, I want you to stand up, and I want you to take a selfie with the person next to you. So do it right now. I'm not kidding. Stand up. Everyone up. Take out your phones. Come on, let's stretch our legs. No, it's great.
I don't really like taking selfies.
Give it a try. If you've never taken a selfie before, if this is your first one, that's even better. So I call these the mandatory selfies, and I'll explain why it's important. And I want you to, if you have social media, if you have Twitter, if you have Instagram, I want you to post it. And I want you to tag me, and I'm at Mr. Bikes a bunch. And I want you to tag the event. The hashtag is Love Your Streets or HamCLS. So there's a reason why I want you to do this, and because the reason why I get people to do this is because I think it's really important to emphasize to you guys all that it's really important that you be visible. There's 200 people in this room tonight that have taken time out of their busy schedule to be here to talk about the streets that they travel on every single day because they want to make them better. That's huge for a community the size of Hamilton. You guys should all be giving yourselves a pat on the back. You need to be making yourself visible. You need to be making yourself vocal, because you can damn sure bet that every single person that opposes the ideas that we're talking about here today is going to make themselves very visible and very vocal every time these issues come up. So this is why it's important to stay visible. So I want to just give you guys a quick background on myself. So a little bit of my story. Now, the reason I do this is because I'm a total narcissist. And I also like to talk about where I came from. Because, you know, I ride a bike most places, and people automatically assume that I'm from Vancouver, or I'm from Amsterdam, or I'm from, you know, Montreal. Truth is, I'm from Carstairs, Alberta. This is a town that has the word car in its name. It tells you something about the culture of that place. This is a place where as soon as you turn 16, you get your driver's license, you get whatever car you can afford, and you start to drive. I remember driving, this is my high school in the background, I remember driving from there to the convenience store at lunch. It was 300 meters away. I clocked it last time I was at home. So that's the kind of community I grew up in. In 2007, I moved to Toronto, and I lived in Kensington Market. And I discovered the joy of walkable places, of places where I could actually explore by foot, human scale or kind of development. And, you know, at the same time, I also discovered the TTC. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Toronto Transit Commission, but I got really tired of waiting for it. One night, it took me 2 hours to get to a place where it normally took me 45 minutes. And I said, the heck with this. I saw these people going by me on their bikes. And at 23 years old, having not been on a bike since I was 12, I decided I'm going to get back on a bike. And so I went out the next day, and I bought my 1982 Peugeot, which I still have. This thing is my baby. It's my beater bike, and I love it to death. And this blew the city wide open for me. It really did, because what it did is it showed me neighborhoods that were beyond my walking reach. It showed me that this was the fastest way to get around a congested city. And it showed me that I didn't need to rely on a car to get places that I used to think were really far away. So in 2011, my wife came into our room one day and she said, I got into medical school, we're moving to Hamilton. And my first thought was, oh. Because the only vision of Hamilton I ever had was coming over the Skyway Bridge. And I discovered this city that was alive with culture, that was this place where there were all sorts of social capital building up. And that was really exciting to me. And so I really dug in to the city of Hamilton, and I loved everything about it except the streets. And I think that's really indicative of how a lot of people feel. They love this city, but they don't love the streets. They don't love how the grid network is laid out. They don't love how traffic moves. And I think it's really hard to truly love a place where you live if you don't love your streets. They are the largest piece of public infrastructure that we have in our city. They take up more public space than anything else we have in Hamilton. So it's really important to really get to, be involved in what's going on with your streets. So how many of you guys, like me, used to read Choose Your Own Adventure books? Okay, wow, that's actually awesome. I didn't think there would be that many. So I always loved reading to the end and finding, kind of the good outcomes and trying to figure out how I could get to it, right? Do you guys too? Yeah. So I'm going to offer you guys a little bit of a kind of sneak preview, one of the end pieces of my presentation. So here's kind of a shocker. I don't actually care that much about cycling. So I'm going to leave that with you guys, and I'm going to talk to you for 15 more minutes about cycling. But I'll leave that with you. I don't care that much about cycling. So let's talk about where Hamilton's at. So we've got this cycling master plan, Shifting Gears, 2009. A good plan at that time, I would say. Not an exemplary plan, but a good plan. What it's left us with is a network of relatively fragmented, relatively kind of 1.0 bike lanes. So bike lanes that really cater to people that look like me, kind of the strong and aggressive cyclist, or to the enthusiastic and confident. It doesn't really reflect family cycling, cycling for people that are maybe not quite as aggressive as I am on the roads. And that's a problem, because if you want to get more people cycling, you need to make them feel safe. So we've also got this at the provincial level. Just kind of real quick, because I'm also a total policy nerd on this kind of stuff, but we've got Ontario's first cycling strategy update in over 20 years, and this includes some pretty big things, like the direction to make Ontario the best province in the country for cycling. So we've got to overtake Quebec and BC. But it also includes some infrastructure funding for cycling-specific infrastructure. It includes some new design guidelines. It includes a whole bunch of stuff that lets municipalities play within a bigger sandbox that includes more cycling infrastructure. So it's pretty great. But despite that, we've got a lot of roads that still look like this. So this is Cannon Street, as I'm sure you all know. And so I saw Cannon Street, and I was really fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, to be approached by a couple of people named Leisha Knopf and Kevin Makins, who were my kind of co-conspirators in Yes We Cannon. And I was a cog in this great big community-powered machine called Yes We Cannon. And this was one of the biggest kind of community engagement pieces that Hamilton has ever seen. And it took a street like Cannon Street, and it turned it into something that is exemplary in Ontario. It's Ontario's longest stretch of protected two-way cycling infrastructure. It's our first real cycle track in Ontario, so it really is something that I'm pretty impressed with. And so it took that, and of course now it looks like this. So it's more kind of cycling 2.0, starting to get to the people that we heard from during Yes We Can, and that said, I'd love to ride my bike more, but I don't feel safe. So this kind of starts to solve some of those problems. We do have the bike share. I think it's great. We've talked about it a lot. I heard a really cool quote about how important bike share can be, and someone described it as if a UFO landed in the middle of the city. That's how transformative it can be. So, I'm really excited for this to hit the ground. Now, I want to just shift gears really quick, and I want to talk about something that happened recently. Has anyone been following what's been going on Herkimer and Charlton? Okay, so we've got a few. So Herkimer and Charlton had some bike lanes proposed on them, and they were kind of these traditional 1.0 bike lanes, where the bike lane went right by basically the driver's side of the door. And the reason why these are dangerous is because every single car has a driver. And when that door pops open in front of you, your choices are go up and over the handlebars or go out into traffic. Neither one's very good. So the community said no. I really like the fact that we've all got the red X's in our presentation. It's a good unifying theme. We need like the Family Feud buzzer for next time. But I work in the active transportation industry. This is what I do for a living. I'm very fortunate. So I'm used to seeing communities say no to bike lanes. It kind of happens all the time. What doesn't happen all the time is a community saying no because it's not good enough. That was something that was really unique because the community said, no, we don't want your crappy 1.0 bike lane in the door zone. We want something more like this, where it's protected by the parked cars. And this is actually in Montreal. This is a picture I took when I was there in August. And this would be the other way. You wouldn't have the car doors, the driver doors opening. It would actually be the passenger doors that would open into the bike lane. But not every car's got a passenger. And so it means that there's fewer incidences of cyclists getting doored. And the biggest danger for dooring for cyclists is not when they actually get hit by the door. It's when they have to swing out into traffic unexpectedly and are then hit by oncoming cars. So all that to say there's a lot of capital built up around complete streets in Hamilton. I really think that in Hamilton here, we've got to acknowledge that we've got a pretty significant weakness. And our weakness is these great, big, super fast one-way streets. And we've got all sorts of them. We've got Main Street, where it's 5 lanes wide. We've got Wellington Street, 4 lanes wide. We've got things like Wilson Street, 4 lanes wide, again. The kind of cool thing about all this, though, is there's not really anywhere else in Ontario that's got all this excess road capacity. So we've got a ton of excess capacity on our roads, and we can do something different with them. And the neat thing is, the conversation is really starting to change at the city level because they're realizing that all that excess lane means a lot of excess money spent. So they're starting to have those conversations around how they can use those existing resources better. So in a time of limited public resources, we need to start talking about how we do more with less. And doing more with less never results in more single occupant vehicles. It's as simple as that. So, I just need to fast forward. There we go. Okay. So I've laid out where we're at. We know what we need to improve, so now what? So how many people have seen something like this, a die-in? Has anyone else seen a die-in before? This is like where a bunch of cyclists lay down on the road and draw chalk outlines around themselves to signify all the dead cyclists. And these are I kind of call this advocacy 1.0. When you're on the outside looking in, you really want to you want to make a splash, but you want to do so in a way that's kind of poking the decision makers in the eye. And I call that kind of advocacy 1.0. Now I want to show you this picture, and this is another selfie. And this is a friend of mine, Scott Bricker. Scott Bricker is the executive director of Bike Pittsburgh. And so this is a picture Scott took when he was in Copenhagen. Now the reason this picture is actually important is because, not of Scott, but because of the person behind him. That's the mayor of Pittsburgh. That's Mayor Bill Peduto. He went on a cycling trip with Scott to Copenhagen. Since Bill Peduto was elected, they've built 8.5 kilometers of protected bike lanes through their downtown. Do you think that was a coincidence that that happened? That is because while protests put cycling in the media, relationships put it on the agenda. There's a great saying I've heard at a couple different conferences: if you're not at the table, odds are you're on the menu. So you really need to make sure that you're at the table. And here in Hamilton, we're at that point. We're no longer fighting to get our foot in the door, to be at the table to talk about complete streets. We're there. We're at Advocacy 2.0. We just need to make sure that we are keeping the pressure on and providing effective, helpful advocacy as we move forward. How many people know where this is? Anyone take a guess? Anyone? Utrecht, sure. It's Copenhagen, actually, this one. Yeah, I know. It could be any one of the cycling meccas that we get a lot of people talking about. So this is where, for people like me, this is what we want to see our cities become. But the problem is that so many of our decision makers and the people that we're talking to, this is their lived day to day. And they can't see how they can ever possibly get from where they are to where we want them to be. They can't see how they're going to get from that to that. They just don't understand. So we need to be able to spell it out for them in a very step-by-step way. So we need to talk about places like Missoula, Montana more. How many people have heard of Missoula, Montana? Yeah, we've got a couple. All right. So Missoula is this small town in the middle of Montana, and they have like 5 to 8% of their population riding their bikes every day. To put that in perspective, if we saw that in Hamilton, we'd have between 25 and 40,000 cyclists on our road every day. So, these are the places where they're seeing huge booms in cycling because they're making investments. Or Indianapolis. What city could be more associated with car culture than Indianapolis? Their main economic driver is a bunch of dudes driving around 500 times around a circle. And yet, they've built this fantastic 13-kilometer cultural trail that connects 5 of their communities together. It's resulted in billions in development in Indianapolis. Billions with a B. This is huge for their city. They're becoming a draw to young people. They're becoming a place where families want to live and where businesses want to establish themselves. We need to talk about places like Washington, D.C., where they've made the hard decisions on some of the roads that were congested, and they've said, nope, we're going to take away a lane of traffic anyways, because unless we start to get rid of sidewalks or our historic buildings, we can't fit any more cars on them. So we need to start thinking about how we move people, not cars. So that's how we start to get past a couple of these things. Now, I want to talk really quickly about adrenaline and dopamine. So I'm going to get into like neuroscience here. And I'm no neuroscientist, so pardon me if there's anyone in the room that knows a lot more about this than I do. I'm going to really simplify it. There's 2 receptors that are important to me as an advocate. The first one is adrenaline, the second one is dopamine. This is what adrenaline looks like. Adrenaline's the fight or flight hormone. So basically, if you walk into a room and you tell someone they're wrong, if they can't run away, they're going to fight you. They've identified you as an enemy. They're going to disagree with everything you say. They're going to dig in their heels. They're going to solidify their position. You're not going to get anything done. Dopamine, on the other hand, dopamine's this wonderful thing that signifies that you're working together to accomplish a shared goal. Even if you might not normally agree on everything, if you can find those shared goals and move things together, that's how you start to make progress. So dopamine identifies you as a friend, and then you're able to start making more kind of beneficial decisions together. This is Tom Jackson. How many people know who Tom Jackson is? Tom Jackson's a city councilor here in Hamilton. He's been a councilor for almost as long as I've been alive. And Tom is not what you would call the most bike-friendly councilor. He's one of only 2 councilors that's used his veto authority. And I met with Tom when we were talking about the Yes We Can and bike lane. And Tom says to me, I'm all for cycling. I've built trails and I'm all for the recreational stuff, but I just don't see the demand for commuter cycling. And I said to him, Tom, you haven't built anything for them. So of course there's no demand. And I told him about Indianapolis. And I told him about all the different places that have built protected bike infrastructure and seen dramatic rises in their number of cyclists. And guess what that did? Very little. Because we couldn't agree that there was a demand. What we could agree on was that the picture on the right looks like a nicer place to be than the picture on the left. And from there, we were able to have a conversation about why the revitalization of Cannon Street was so important. And Tom ended up supporting the vote, not once, not twice, but thrice when it came before council. So this is why relationships and dopamine are so important, because we could throw all the stats and data we wanted at them. We brought this data sheet, we brought the fact sheets, we brought the infographics. But in the end, the stories, the people, the emotion was the thing that was so important. Because without that, it's just a wall of stats. And people don't connect with stats. They connect with people. So we need to connect as people first. We need the data to back us up. Don't get me wrong. But the data is there. 2014 has been the strongest year for data in North America as far as cycling and walking goes. So, at Share the Road, the organization I work for, we do polling every year, and we find such broad support for cycling investment all across the province. No matter how we ask the question, no matter what we ask, we see at least 60% of Ontarians agree with investing more in cycling. Simple as that. This is a great slide from New York City. When they installed protected bike lanes, they found that all injuries on the road, so this is injuries to drivers, to pedestrians, to cyclists, everyone, all injuries went down. It's safer for everyone. Now the really, there's higher retail sale too. The really cool thing about this one that's not on this slide, they found that while incidences of speeding on that corridor went down, the median speed of traffic traveling went up. So the average person who wasn't an idiot and speeding to get from light to light and causing delays by their irrational behavior trying to get ahead of people, the average person was moving through that corridor faster after a lane was taken away and given to a protected bike lane. Holy smokes. Can you imagine that? Other data, I'd be remiss if I didn't include the rise of protected bike lanes, because we're going to be on this map very soon. So everywhere that protected bike lanes and great cycling infrastructure is installed, the number of cyclists explodes without fail. I have yet to I've asked the question to dozens of opponents, probably in the hundreds now, and I've said, show me one place where it doesn't work. Just one. And they haven't been able to. So until they can, we're not debating on data, we're debating on base emotion. But that's the problem. Because the data is clear. I mean, even the Federal Highway Administration in the States is saying that on every metric that matters, on vehicular miles traveled, on healthcare costs, on injuries to the road, on road maintenance costs, every single thing that matters, cycling and pedestrian infrastructure is beneficial. But emotions get in the way. So we need to find a way to connect with these people. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm getting a little parched. As I do. I don't know why I did that. Okay. People don't like feeling like they're losing something. And every time we talk about complete streets, we talk about bike lanes, we talk about pedestrian infrastructure. I don't know if you guys have been following what's going on in Toronto. They decided to say that they're going to come out and they're going to narrow lanes in Toronto. And a bunch of people said, you can't do that. You can't take away 2 feet from our traffic lanes. It's going to cause traffic chaos, despite all studies to the contrary. They don't like losing something. Even if that's that useless 2 feet that you don't need in a lane, they don't like losing something. So we need to emphasize to people that we're not taking anything away. We're giving things back. We're giving back the opportunity for activity and safety and family time with their children. You know, how many people in here walked or biked to school as a kid? In 20 years, when we ask that question, the number of hands that goes up is going to be less than a third of what we have in this room. That is a terrifying statistic. If you are someone involved in public health, terrifying. Because that is a huge generational shift in how we are moving as children. So, we need to be able to give that option back to people, to walk and bike to their schools with their kids again. Choice and freedom. Complete streets are about using the right tool for the job. Now, I don't know if any of you guys know this, but I'm a bit of a wizard in the kitchen. Not to brag or anything. I won a TV show called Come Dine With Me Canada. No big deal. Anyway, I know, right? Moving on. So I know my way around the kitchen. And I've got these two things that I really love in my kitchen. I've got my knife and I've got my food processor. Now, my knife is my everyday tool. I use it every single day, whether it's for chopping apples, cutting carrots, making soup, whatever I need to do. Usually, it's the knife. Now, when I have big jobs, when I need to make salsa or I'm making a great big batch of soup, or company's coming over and I'm making a big batch of hummus, well, then I'll bring out the food processor. So it's about using the right tool for the job. Now, I wouldn't be much use if you took away my knife in the kitchen and you said, nope, you can't use this. Use your food processor to peel that apple. Well, I wouldn't be very good at that. The food processor is the biggest, most expensive, most high-powered device I have in my kitchen. But that doesn't mean it's the right tool for every single job. And so if we take away people's choice to use everything but the biggest, most expensive, most high-powered tool to get them around, then we're kind of robbing them of that choice. And we're forcing them to use the wrong tool for the job. That's that 55% of trips under 1 kilometer in Hamilton that are being taken by car. That's the wrong tool for the job. We need to give people the choice back. Complete streets mean complete freedom. It means the choice to use whatever you want to do to get around. You know, we hear a lot of black and white conversations around complete streets. You know, people say, well, you just want to get everyone out of your cars. You want to ban cars from the road. You want to give all the roads to cyclists and pedestrians. No. I don't want to force anyone to get out of their car. I just don't want to feel like I'm going to die every time I don't take mine. Right? So that's how we need to start talking about these things. We also need to start talking about this money. Because owning and operating a vehicle here in Ontario costs us $8,000 to $10,000 a year. If you've got a family that is taking all those 1 kilometer and under trips with a second car, they're spending a whole lot more every year. That's a lot of money that's leaving the local economy. If we can get families to go from 2 cars to 1 car, using transit, using cycling, using walking, using car share, using all these other transportation options that are becoming available to us, we get a lot more money in our local economy, and we get a lot happier, healthier, more sustainable communities. So, this is kind of getting close to the end here. We had a couple things happen in Hamilton. Does anyone know where this is? This is Queen Street. Queen Street was completely rebuilt from the ground up. This was such a tremendous opportunity for our city to provide safe pedestrian and cycling access up the mountain. Instead, they rebuilt it without any consideration for cycling pedestrian access. You know why? Because it wasn't in the cycling master plan, and it was done before the pedestrian mobility plan came along. These are 20-year pieces of infrastructure, folks. That's going to be like that for 20 years because there's no opportunity to rebuild the roadbed. This is what Main Street could look like, and they did a resurfacing, and instead this is what we got. These are misses on catastrophic scales, and we cannot afford to continue building a city that looks like it's looked for the last 60 years. Every time we do an infrastructure investment, it is a 20-year investment. We need to start building the city we want to see 20 years in the future, not the city we've seen for the last 60. And that is why this is so important and why I'm so happy that there's so many people in this room, because that, to me, indicates that these big misses are going to become less and less prevalent. So thank you all for being here for that. Now, I told you earlier, I don't care about cycling, and then I continued to talk at you for 15, 20 minutes about cycling. But what I really care about, folks, is I really care about communities. I care about places where children can walk or bike to school. I care about places where people know their neighbors' faces, not their license plates and auto makes. I care about places where your shop owners know who you are, where you spend money locally, where people are happy, healthy, and connected to the place they live. And it just so happens that walking and cycling happen to be really good indicators of that. And that's what we need to emphasize. It's not about how people move around so much. It's about how people connect with the communities in which they live. And you don't connect when you go door to door in a big metal box. You just don't. You connect when you're out there at human scale. And that's what walking and cycling is all about. So I'm going to give you my 3 takeaways that are kind of like the sum-ups of what I've talked about. Thing number 1, build on what we have. So I talked a lot about what we've got. We've heard a lot about that tonight. And then start to move forward with those. So identify the places where you can make the most difference and then build on those. Take away the reasons to say no. Tell stories. Use data. If you need support from the community, tap people on the shoulder. That's what we did with Yes We Can. And how many people did we talk to? Did we run into anyone here at our first art crawl in May of 2013? Yeah, we had a few. Awesome. So the thing for me was so exciting and so interesting about when we went out there is we were asking people, we were standing out there saying, you want to sign a petition? People kept walking. We said, it's about bike lanes on Cannon. People turned around. It was so remarkable because there's such a desire to see change in a positive way in this city. And then the final thing, we need to make the Complete Streets tent bigger. We need to make people realize this isn't about just the downtown. This isn't about just the people who live on Cannon Street. This is about the people who live on Stone Church, who live, up on Rymel, who live near Garth. And at the end of the day, Sarah showed that map. It's not the downtown hipsters looking at their phones that are being killed on our roads. It's suburban grandparents. So we need to start building age-friendly communities too. So that's my whole presentation. I want to just kind of say thank you so much for all of you coming out, and hopefully you have some good questions, and hopefully we kind of inspired you to do some good stuff.